It was a Tuesday night when my phone buzzed, lighting up the dark room. I was half asleep, the glow of the screen painting the ceiling in pale blue. One message. From Mom. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. "You chose that stranger over your family." I stared at the words, my pulse quickening, the familiar ache blooming in my chest. I'd learned long ago that texts from her never meant comfort, only guilt, only blame. My thumbs hovered before I typed back, because they cared. I hit send before I could stop myself. Silence followed. No typing bubbles, no apology. Just the dull hum of the air conditioner and the sting of her words replaying in my head. The stranger she meant wasn't really a stranger. But to my mom, anyone who wasn't bound by blood didn't count as family. Anyone who dared to care for me when she didn't was the enemy. Her text dragged me backward through years of gaslighting and guilt-tripping every time I'd been told I was ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. She'd always found a way to make my boundaries sound like betrayal. I sat there in the dim light, staring at my reflection in the phone screen. Tired eyes, a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. I thought I'd moved on, thought the distance I'd created had finally healed something. But one message from her and it was like the old wounds had never closed. My mind drifted to the person she called a stranger, the one who'd stepped in when my own family turned their backs, the one who'd shown me that love didn't have to hurt, that caring didn't have to come with conditions. I'd met them during one of the hardest seasons of my life, when I was lost, burnt out, and alone. Back then, Mom had stopped answering my calls saying she was too busy to deal with my problems. That's when the stranger, no, my friend, showed up and changed everything. Mom's text wasn't just a message. It was a reminder of every time she hadn't cared, every time she'd let me fall, and it was also a reminder of who had caught me when she didn't. I met Alex 3 years ago, on a night when everything felt like it was falling apart. My car had broken down on the side of the highway in the pouring rain, my phone at 2%, no one answering my calls, not Mom, not my brother, not anyone. I remember sitting there, shivering, headlights blurring in the downpour, wondering if this was how people just disappeared. Then Alex pulled over. No hesitation. Just a stranger in a gray hoodie stepping out into the rain, asking if I was okay. They helped push my car to the shoulder, called a tow, and stayed with me until it arrived. Not once did they ask for anything in return. When I thanked them through chattering teeth, they smiled and said, "No one deserves to be stranded alone." That sentence stuck with me. No one deserves to be stranded alone. Weeks later, we met for coffee as thanks, and somehow that one small act turned into something bigger. Friendship. Consistency. They checked in when I was sick. Showed up when my birthday passed unnoticed by my family, bringing a tiny cupcake with a candle. It was the first time in years someone had made me feel seen. Meanwhile, Mom dismissed Alex as some random person. She'd scoff when I mentioned them, rolling her eyes like kindness was suspicious. "You barely know them," she'd say, "but I did, because they showed up, because they listened when I talked about things my family refused to hear." When my dad got sick last year and I tried to handle the hospital visits alone, Alex was there every day, bringing food, keeping me company, sitting quietly when the silence hurt too much. Mom never came once. She texted, "Keep me updated." That was it. That's when I realized the truth. Family isn't defined by DNA, it's defined by who stands beside you when life falls apart. The night after Dad passed, Alex stayed until sunrise. They didn't say much, just sat with me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like that broken-down girl on the side of the road. I felt safe. That's the stranger Mom was talking about, the one who cared when she didn't. I used to think love was something you earned, that if you were helpful enough, quiet enough, perfect enough, someone might finally notice you. Growing up in our house, that was survival. My older brother, Marcus, was the son everything orbited around. Straight A's, varsity athlete, charming even when he was cruel. My parents beamed at his every move, like he hung the moon. When he yelled, it was, "He's just passionate." When I cried, it was, "You're too sensitive." I learned early that invisibility was safer than conflict, that silence was more acceptable than needing anything. I was the helper, the tag-along, the background noise to his spotlight. When I brought home a report card full of A's, my mom skimmed it, murmured, "Good job," then launched into a story about Marcus getting a leadership award. When I won an art contest at school, she forgot to come to the ceremony. I had a migraine, she said later, not even looking up from her phone. I started hiding things, my drawings, my certificates, my excitement. It felt easier than facing the indifference. It was like they saw me only when I made a mistake. If I forgot to unload the dishwasher, suddenly it was a lecture about responsibility. If Marcus forgot, it was, he's got so much on his plate. The contrast was constant. The message was clear, love wasn't given freely, it was traded, and I never had the right currency. I used to lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Was I not enough? Too quiet? Too plain? I didn't have the words for it then, but now I know what it was. I was starved for affection and trained to believe that was normal. I was the easy child. The one who didn't ask for too much, the one who didn't cause problems, and so they gave me less attention, less praise, less love. I became self-sufficient, not out of strength, but out of necessity. They told me I was so mature for my age, like that was a compliment. But what they really meant was, thank you for not needing us. I was 16 when I collapsed in the hallway at school. Sharp pain in my side, dizziness, the world spinning out. They rushed me to the ER, appendicitis. I remember lying on that hospital bed, cold and scared, the fluorescent lights too bright. I kept staring at the door, waiting for someone from my family to walk in. But they didn't. The nurse called my mom 3 times. When she finally picked up, her voice was clipped, annoyed. Can't your father handle it? I'm at work. My dad showed up 2 hours later, barely awake, still in his mechanic's uniform. He stayed long enough to sign the papers, then left before I was taken into surgery. Text me when you're done, he muttered, then vanished. I woke up alone, my throat dry, my body aching. No one at my bedside, no flowers, no warmth, just the beep of machines and the thick weight of abandonment. Marcus didn't call. Mom texted, hope you're feeling better. That was it, no visit. No, I love you. No questions, just silence. I spent 2 days in that hospital room pretending I didn't care, scrolling through my phone like I wasn't waiting for them to show up. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was realizing they weren't coming. That even in my most vulnerable moment I wasn't a priority, and I would have stayed believing that was normal, if it weren't for Alex. We barely knew each other then. But they'd heard from a mutual friend what had happened and showed up, coffee in hand, a dumb balloon in the other. You looked like someone who could use something ridiculous, they said with a grin. I nearly cried. Not because of the balloon, but because someone had come. Someone had cared. Alex stayed for hours, talking about nothing and everything. They helped me walk to the bathroom when I was too dizzy, sat beside me when the nurse changed my IV. They weren't family, but they treated me better than mine ever had. That moment cracked something open in me. For the first time, I questioned everything I'd been taught about love. Maybe I wasn't hard to love. Maybe my family just didn't know how. Or maybe they never tried. Marcus could do no wrong. He was the golden child, the headline act, the one my parents spoke about like he was destined for greatness. Marcus just got promoted again. Mom would brag to her friends on speakerphone, loud enough for me to hear. He's such a hard worker. I'd be sitting across the room, home from work myself after pulling a double shift, and she wouldn't even ask how my day was. When Marcus forgot Mom's birthday, she laughed it off. He's busy, poor thing. When I missed a family dinner once because of a deadline, she didn't talk to me for a week. You always put your career before family, she'd said, as if she'd ever noticed when I showed up. It wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't. Every time Marcus stumbled, they made excuses. Every time I succeeded, they found a way to make it smaller. When I bought my first car, Mom said, well, Marcus had a nicer one at your age. When I got a promotion, Dad's response was, don't get too comfortable. The real world's tougher than you think, but when Marcus lost his job, they framed it as bravery. He's just figuring things out. I figured things out alone, but no one called me brave for it. At holidays, they'd pass him the biggest slice of pie, brag about his networking, even though half the time he was borrowing money from them. Once, when I offered to help pay for groceries, Mom waved me off. Your brother needs it more right now. That was the story of my life. Marcus needed, I managed. He took, I adapted. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was stronger for it, but resentment has a way of building in the quiet, settling in your chest like smoke you can't clear. I stopped bringing up my achievements, stopped sharing anything personal. What was the point? They'd always turn the conversation back to him anyway. The last time I tried to talk to Mom about how it made me feel, she said, "You're jealous. That's not a good look." Jealous! As if I wanted her approval more than I needed her love. That word echoed in my head for years. Maybe I was jealous not of Marcus, but of what he got so easily. Their attention, their softness, their care, things I'd begged for and learned to live without. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, one of those days that seems ordinary until it isn't. I'd been scrolling through social media when I saw the photos, Marcus's engagement party. The string lights, the cake, Mom and Dad grinning ear to ear, their arms wrapped around him and his fiancée. I stared at the pictures, numb. I hadn't even known he was engaged. No one told me. Not a call, not an invite, nothing. I checked the date yesterday. They'd celebrated without me. My chest tightened, a mix of shock and something colder, something older. I thought about every family event I'd rearranged my life to attend, every time I'd tried to show up just to be met with silence or backhanded comments, and now this. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd chosen to exclude me. I sat there for a long time, the photos burning into my screen. At first, I cried quietly, like I'd done as a kid when no one came to my school plays. But then, something shifted. The tears dried, replaced by a strange calm. It was clarity, the kind that hits like lightning. I finally saw my family for what they were, not what I'd hoped they'd be. I realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love from people who only knew how to take. I wasn't invisible by accident. They made me invisible because it was easier for them. I called Mom, not expecting her to answer, and she didn't disappoint. Straight to voicemail. So I texted, "I saw the pictures. Congratulations. Next time, don't bother pretending we're close." I didn't wait for a response. I deleted the family group chat, blocked the notifications, and sat in silence. For once, the quiet felt like peace, not punishment. That night, Alex came by with takeout and found me sitting on the couch, surrounded by empty space. I told them what happened, expecting pity. Instead, they nodded, calm, understanding. "It hurts," they said softly. "But maybe this is the start of your freedom." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. I wasn't losing a family. I was finally letting go of one that never saw me. It was a rainy Thursday, the first time I broke down in front of Alex. We were sitting in their car, parked outside my apartment, the windshield wipers brushing away the storm in quiet rhythm. I don't even remember what triggered it. Maybe it was something small, like forgetting to buy milk or misplacing my keys, but the tears came fast, hot, and relentless. I tried to hide it at first, turning my face to the window, swallowing the sobs the way I'd been trained to since childhood. Don't make a scene, don't be a burden. But Alex didn't say anything at first. They just reached over and turned down the radio, their presence steady, unbothered. After a moment, they spoke calm, grounded. "You don't have to be okay all the time." That sentence hit harder than any lecture my parents ever gave. It wasn't sympathy, it was permission. I crumbled. I told them everything about the photos I wasn't in, the childhood I spent trying to shrink myself, the constant ache of being the afterthought. I expected discomfort, maybe awkward silence, or the classic, "everyone's family is complicated." But instead, Alex just listened. No interruptions, no comparisons, just presence. At one point, they reached over and handed me a napkin from the glove box, the only tissue they had. "You deserve more than that," they said quietly. "You always have." Something shifted inside me that night. A tether I didn't realize was wrapped around my throat loosened. For so long, I'd believed that my worth was conditional, that love had to be earned, that attention was rationed, but Alex didn't ask for anything. They just saw me. In the days that followed, their kindness became a lifeline. A text in the middle of a rough day, a dumb meme to make me laugh, a coffee waiting on my desk. Nothing grand. Just consistency. I started to realize how rare that was, how foreign it felt to be supported without strings attached. And that's when trust began to grow, not just in Alex, but in the idea that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the problem. Maybe I wasn't too much. Maybe I'd just been giving my loyalty to people who never deserved it. It didn't take long for my family to notice I'd pulled away. And they hated it. The silence that followed my message about Marcus's engagement party was short-lived. Within a week, Mom called. Twice. I let both ring out. Then came the texts, guilt-laced, sharp-edged. Are you seriously cutting off your family over one party? Followed by, don't forget who raised you. I stared at the words, jaw tight. Raised me? I thought of every missed play, every dismissed feeling, every time they called Marcus the miracle kid and acted like I was just the add-on. Now they wanted to pretend we were some picture-perfect family. But what really set them off was when they saw the post. It was a photo Alex had tagged me in, a blurry shot of us laughing over greasy fries and milkshakes. Harmless. But in their eyes, it was betrayal. Mom called again. I picked up this time, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd say something different. She didn't. So that's who you're replacing us with now? Her voice was cold, accusing. A stranger? I bit my tongue, then replied, Alex has shown me more love in the past year than you have my entire life. Silence on her end. Then the voice I knew too well, icy, wounded, manipulative. Why do you always side with people outside the family? Blood is thicker than water. I laughed, bitter. Blood is only thick when it's not diluted with control, guilt, and silence. That didn't go over well. The next day, Marcus texted me too. You're being dramatic. You've always been like this. Don't let your little sob story make you forget who your real family is. Real family, like they ever acted like it. The pressure came: fast calls, texts, even a voicemail from my aunt asking why I was tearing the family apart. But I didn't waver. Every accusation, every attempt to twist the story only made my decision clearer. They weren't mad because I hurt them. They were mad because I stopped letting them hurt me. And when I chose someone who actually cared, it exposed how little they ever did. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, Mom's idea, of course. Let's just talk like adults, she'd said in her message, dripping with civility that didn't fool me for a second. She picked the restaurant, a loud, overpriced spot where she knew I wouldn't raise my voice. I showed up late on purpose. When I walked in, the table was already full. Mom, Dad, Marcus, even Aunt Sylvia, all dressed like this was some formal reunion instead of an ambush. We were starting to think you wouldn't show, Dad said, half smiling. Wishful thinking, I muttered, sliding into the seat furthest from Marcus. He barely looked up from his phone. We ordered. Or rather, they did. I didn't bother pretending I had an appetite. The small talk was forced. How's work? What's new? Isn't this place nice? And then Mom cleared her throat. We're concerned about how distant you've been. That was her opening line, like this was an intervention. Concerned, I echoed, fighting the urge to laugh. That's rich. You've changed, she went on. And not in a good way. We feel like we're losing you. You never had me, I said flatly. You had a version of me who kept quiet and swallowed everything. That person's gone. Marcus scoffed. Here we go again. I turned to him, eyes sharp. No, really, let's go there. Let's talk about how you've coasted your entire life while I begged for scraps of attention. Let's talk about how you forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, and Mom still calls you the thoughtful one. You're being dramatic, he muttered. Mom cut in, tone clipped. This isn't about your brother. It's about your attitude. I took a breath. This was it. It's about everything. Every moment you ignored me. Every time you called me too sensitive. Every time I was in pain and you told me to get over it. You're mad because I finally stopped showing up to be your emotional punching bag. Silence, just the clinking of plates around us. Then, softly, I said the truth I'd carried for too long. You want to know why I chose them over you? Because they were there when you weren't. The table froze. Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Aunt Sylvia's eyes dropped to her plate. Marcus just stared. I stood up. Enjoy dinner, I said, and walked out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the box I hadn't opened in years. Old notebooks, sketches from high school. A few photos me with a science fair ribbon, grinning. Mom wasn't in the crowd, neither was Dad. Just a teacher in the background, clapping. I flipped through journal pages, my own handwriting jagged and raw. They forgot to pick me up again. Marcus got a new laptop. I asked for paint. They said no. I pretended I wasn't sick so I wouldn't bother anyone. Entry after entry. It was all there, the quiet erasure of who I was. Proof that I hadn't made this up. That I hadn't overreacted. That I'd been carrying the weight of being forgotten my entire life. The gaslight began to flicker and finally go out. I reached out to Miss Hawthorne, my old English teacher, the one who once drove me home when I stayed after school to avoid being alone. We hadn't spoken in years, but she remembered me. "You were always so careful not to ask for anything," she said. "Like you thought you had to earn every bit of kindness." Her words cracked something in me. I told her about the dinner, about everything. She listened, then said, "You were never the problem. You just learned how to survive in a house where being seen was dangerous." I hung up the call, my chest tight, but lighter somehow. Later that week, I talked to Claudia, my cousin on Dad's side. She'd always been the quiet one at family events, the observer. "I used to feel bad for you," she admitted. "Your mom talked about Marcus constantly. You were just too there. Like wallpaper." That was it. That was the feeling. Wallpaper. Present, but unnoticed. Decorative, but not important. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. They just never bothered to see me. And now that I'd finally stopped letting them ignore me, they were furious. Because people like that don't want you to heal. They want you to hurt quietly. They want you to stay small, grateful for crumbs. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I was done apologizing for needing more. The first person I told about the job offer was Alex. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even Marcus. Just Alex. I'd worked my whole life for that moment, finally being recognized at work, offered the lead on a project that could shift my entire career. My hands were shaking when the email came through. It felt unreal. But when I called Alex, breathless, half laughing, half crying, they didn't say, "Finally," or "It's about time." They just said, "I'm so proud of you. You deserve every bit of this." No envy, no backhanded comments, just pure, solid support. That weekend, they threw a small celebration at their apartment. String lights on the patio, homemade cupcakes with little paper flags that read CEO Energy, and a handwritten card that said, "You were always meant to lead." I stood there that night, surrounded by people Alex had pulled together just for me, friends who'd become my chosen circle, and I felt something I hadn't felt at a family gathering in years. Safe, seen, loved. No pretending, no shrinking, just belonging. It hit me then, quietly but deeply. Alex wasn't the outsider, they were my family. The kind that shows up when you're sick and stays when you're not convenient. The kind that remembers your favorite song and plays it when you've had a rough day. The kind that doesn't weaponize your mistakes. They'd seen me at my lowest in hospital beds, crying in parking lots, spiraling after yet another call from my mom, and they never once made me feel small. They never tried to fix me. They just sat in the storm with me until I could breathe again. I used to think blood meant loyalty. That biology bound us to each other in ways we couldn't break. But it turns out love isn't in the DNA. It's in the details, in the texts that say, "Did you eat today?" In the ride home when you can't stop shaking, in the celebration that doesn't require you to prove your worth first. That night, as I hugged Alex goodbye and walked home with the card still tucked in my bag, I realized something I'd never say out loud at the dinner table I'd stopped sitting at. I had a family. It just wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I chose and who chose me back. The invitation came out of nowhere. A cream-colored envelope, thick and formal, addressed in my mother's tight cursive. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, an invite to Marcus and Ashley's baby shower. A huge backyard event, fully catered, RSVP required. I flipped it over, confused. The date? It was next weekend. The location? My old childhood home. But the real gut punch was the line at the bottom. Registry contributions required in lieu of gifts. Minimum. $250. I almost laughed. Almost. They hadn't spoken to me in months, not after the confrontation, not after the silence I'd chosen for my own peace. But now I was good enough to sponsor the next generation of the golden child. A follow-up email landed in my inbox 2 hours later. From Mom, subject line, "Family comes first." The message was short. "I hope you'll be mature enough to let go of your pride and show up. Don't punish the baby for your own grudges." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just expectation. Like I was some stubborn child being summoned home. But then came the real betrayal. Alex called me 3 days later, their voice tight. "Did you see what your mom posted?" I hadn't. I logged into social media, and there it was, A post from Mom, tagging dozens of extended relatives. A long caption about family unity and certain people choosing outsiders over blood. She never used my name. She didn't have to. The message was clear. She painted me as selfish, cold, ungrateful someone who turned her back on family during joyful milestones. I stared at the screen, my blood buzzing. The comments were worse. Aunts, cousins, all chiming in. It's a shame how some people forget where they came from. Blood is blood. She'll regret this one day. I didn't respond. Not to the email, not to the comments, not to the calls that followed from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Instead, I drafted one last message. Short, direct, final. Consider this my RSVP. I won't be attending or returning. I wish you well, but I'm done being used, blamed, and rewritten. I blocked them all after that, deleted the thread, logged off. The final straw wasn't just the post or the invite or the manipulation. It was the realization that they weren't going to change. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted control. And I'd finally taken mine back. I didn't write the message right away. For weeks, it sat in my drafts half-typed, raw, angry. I'd open it late at night, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, heart pounding. Then I'd close it again. There was always a part of me, small but loud, that asked, what's the point? She wouldn't hear it anyway, but it wasn't about her hearing it. It was about me finally saying it, the words I'd swallowed for years, the truth I'd never been allowed to speak. So I sat at my desk one Sunday morning, the sun creeping through the blinds, coffee cooling next to me, and I wrote, not for revenge, not to hurt, just to release. Subject, since you asked. Mom, you said I chose a stranger over my own family. You're right. I did. But here's the part you refuse to understand. You chose to hurt me. They chose to protect me. When I cried, you called me dramatic. When I achieved something, you called it luck. When I asked for support, you gave me guilt. And when I finally built a life where I didn't need to beg for crumbs, you called me ungrateful. You praised Marcus for breathing and punished me for needing. You watched me shrink and clapped when I stayed small. And still, I tried. I showed up. I called. I forgave. Until I couldn't anymore. The person you call a stranger sat with me when I was broken. They didn't owe me anything, but they gave me everything you withheld. Kindness, respect, consistency. They saw me when you didn't even look. I'm not sending this to reopen anything. I'm sending this to close it. Don't contact me again. Don't ask me to explain my silence. You earned it. Me? I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't need one. I hit send, then blocked her email. I sat there for a long moment afterward, hands still, heart steady. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive. It was quiet, but it was final. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not grief, but relief. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small moments. Quieter mornings, longer breaths. The absence of dread when your phone buzzes. I moved into a new apartment a few months after sending the message. A space that was mine, top to bottom, no childhood ghosts in the walls, no drawer full of unreturned texts. Just sunlight, plants I somehow kept alive, and quiet that didn't feel like punishment. Alex helped me move. They brought donuts and coffee, refused to let me lift a single box. New chapter, they said, grinning, taping a label to my kitchen supplies that read, Fresh Start. They weren't wrong. I started therapy around the same time. My first session, I sat on that couch with my arms crossed, ready to justify everything, but I didn't need to. My therapist just nodded and said, "You've been surviving. Now let's talk about living." And slowly, I did. I learned to unpack the years of gaslighting, the way I blamed myself for their absence, the way I thought I had to earn love by disappearing. I started speaking up more at work. I stopped apologizing for having boundaries. I celebrated small wins like saying no without guilt or not checking their social media. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony with Alex and Claudia. Yes, even Claudia had quietly taken a step toward me, distancing herself from the family drama. We were drinking cheap wine, laughing over a burned frozen pizza, and I realized I felt light, untethered, free. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was seen. Not because I made myself small, but because I stopped hiding. My life didn't become perfect overnight. There were days I still grieved the version of family I never got, but that grief didn't control me anymore. It reminded me how far I'd come. I'd once believed walking away made me weak, but the truth? Leaving saved me. Letting go gave me room to build something better, something real. And now, every time I look around at the life I've created, every choice, every boundary, every new beginning, I don't feel shame. I feel proud. I reclaimed my life. And no one gets to take that from me again. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly, I didn't tell this story for sympathy. I told it because I know what it feels like to question your own memories, to replay moments over and over, wondering if you were too sensitive, too selfish, too much. I know what it feels like to sit at a dinner table surrounded by people who call themselves family and still feel completely alone. And I know how hard it is to walk away, especially when you've been told your whole life that love means staying, enduring, sacrificing, that loyalty means silence. So if you've ever been told that if someone made you believe that speaking up is betrayal, or that setting boundaries makes you cruel, I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. It makes you brave. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who sees your worth, even when you're not at your best. It's who shows up not just when it's convenient, not just when there's something to gain, but when it's uncomfortable, when it matters. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not dramatic for needing consistency. You are not wrong for walking away from people who only love you on their terms. You deserve a life where you don't have to shrink yourself to be included. You deserve conversations, not ultimatums. Warmth, not weaponized guilt. You deserve a home, whether it's in a place, a friend, a partner, or in yourself where you don't feel like a guest in your own story. I used to think that being strong meant staying. Now I know it means knowing when to leave. And not just leave, but to live. To create new traditions, find new people, and write a new narrative, one that isn't built on fear and silence, but on choice and care. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.